So welcome Loveth. So I'm going to go through the energy and biomass and populations tests that I set to you before half term. And see it says October 2014 there. This will be useful to go through even before your summer exam because it has tips on exam technique and things like that. You can see there's some grade boundaries there. Actually I lowered them in the end because it was a tricky test. It's quite common. So when it comes to the first question, they've got some beautiful plankton and animal plankton, or plant plankton, being these little photosynthetic organisms, really tiny, 0.2 millimetres. And in terms of a food chain, these certainly animal plankton eat the plant plankton. And perhaps you know that whales eat these as well. They sort of filter feed them. So when it comes to this graph, animal plankton, you can see there's some information there. Populations, and so the population means the number of organisms within the species. And you've got the month of the year going across the x-axis there. Really important to just check in and say, okay, there's plants on that side and animals on that side. So if you're ever going to be reading off the animal line, then you know you need to be using figures from that axis. And then straight away I can see that says 5 there, and that says 10. So you've got to keep checking in on that. I would spend just a tiny bit of time just looking at it and going, okay, right, what's going on? I know that in the spring it gets warmer. Oh, look, the plant plankton goes up. Yep. Oh, look, there's a bit of a prey and food relationship there. I didn't want to say predator-prey because, of course, plant plankton, they can't really be prey because the nature of them being they can't move. So it's a prey definitely means sort of an animal that can run away, like a gazelle can from a cheetah. So this, what you can certainly see is that relationship. So as there's more food available for the animal plankton, there's a bit of a delay, but then the animal plankton numbers go up. And of course, when there's competition between all these animals, because so much has been eaten and the plant plankton starts going down, the animal plankton numbers will start going down. There's one more line there, and it is mineral ions. Is that right? Oh no, sorry, ignore me completely. It's the same one. Okay, I'm thinking of a different graph later on. So this is quite tricky, this first question, which is asking you to consider basking sharks and the fact that they eat the plankton. So I mentioned whales earlier. Basking sharks also rely on plankton, and specifically the animal plankton. And they're asking you in June, what is the pyramid of biomass going to be? Now I taught you that pyramids of biomass are always pyramid shaped. However, it's a bit tricky. This is a really hard first question, which is very unusual. In June, so bearing in mind looking at that, that's not actually the case. Because basically in June what you've had is this big cull of all the plant plankton. They're really low, animal plankton a lot higher. Now even if you go along and look at the y-axis there, so plant is on about 5, animal is on about 12 or something. So clearly in June the animal plankton bar for the pyramid of biomass needs to be bigger. And so it's for that reason that this is the correct answer. So plant plankton there, animal plankton being bigger, which is really unusual. Okay, so that was a tricky question. Moving across, let's have a look at this now. The graph repeated. Now of course that means they want you to use it again. Okay, let me just move this. Now this is a new graph that you've been given, and this has mineral ions, light and temperature. So let's have a look. So light intensity is this line there. Now that makes sense, doesn't it? As you go through spring, the light intensity goes up and up and up. Summer, really high light intensity, the sun being highest and above us. And then going down towards autumn and winter, and we're in winter, going into winter, the light intensity is certainly lower due to the nature where the sun is. So let's have a look. You've got mineral ions. I'd then have a look at that one next. Oh no, actually no, I'd look at temperature next, because light and temperature tend to correlate. And yes, there you go. You've got the temperature creeping up, and creeping down. Of course, when you've got sun on your face, it gets warmer, so you've got that sort of as evidence there. So mineral ions are really interesting. So I'm going to start here. What you've got in the summer is you've got loads of plants growing. We saw that earlier. So actually, mineral ions are absorbed by plants. And now we're thinking about the plankton. So inside in the ocean, you've got mineral ions that are around, are absorbed by plants in the summer, and so that's why they're actually quite low. However, during this period, you've got all of these plankton dying, and the decay process releases the mineral ions, so that goes back up again. Imagine now we jump to January, so the next year, and then you can see, imagine all those mineral ions from the decay then go down again because they've been absorbed during the plant growth or plant plankton growth. So just getting your head around a graph like that makes a lot of sense. These questions should be dead simple now. So you've got the population of plant plankton increases between February and April. Suggests one reason, higher light intensity or temperature. You can just say one. This is the biology, more photosynthesis, so that is a link there. So that's something you've been picking up from prep school, and I'll be talking about, throughout your whole 2 years of doing your GCSE, I'll be mentioning things like photosynthesis and respiration, the life-sustaining reactions. We all know that plants and plant plankton, they certainly photosynthesize. Anything green does. Okay? So then you've got the population of animal plankton changes between April and July, suggests an explanation for the changes. You've got more food, increase in plant plankton. So April, just looking at that, you've certainly got an increase. Let me just draw that line again. What it goes increase, and then it goes down. Then decreases due to fall in plant plankton, that predator or this like feeder and food relationship. Okay. Concentration of mineral ions changes between February and December, falls as absorbed by plant plankton, mentioned that earlier. So imagine those plant plankton, all the mineral ions go in. And I put two examples there. You've got magnesium and nitrates. And then it increases due to decay. So imagining that little plankton now decaying, what you've got is that release of the mineral ions as a result. So decay of dead plant animals. And you can see there's 3 marks there. So it's that sort of, I wonder how to get that 3rd mark. Let's just say what is decaying. Let's never be vague. It's always a classic reason. Next question is on the carbon cycle. Now, every time you have a carbon cycle question, slightly different format. And carbon, always look for where the CO2 is. So I can see it there. Might even write just CO2 just to remind myself that's what it's talking about. Oh, look, there's the arrow going to green plants. That's got to be photosynthesis, because only photosynthesis takes that in. Okay, now let's have a look here. You've got green plants, an arrow going towards animals. There's got to be feeding. Okay, that's the only way that carbon in the form of carbohydrates can get into the animals. Then you've got arrows going up. So you've got an arrow, oh look, there's microorganisms, okay, another arrow going up, an arrow going up. And now all of these are respiration. Now every living organism respires and that releases CO2. So no wonder that you've got arrows going up. So going down, you've now got 2 Ds here. The idea that plants and animals can both die and decay. And with the decay process, you need the microorganisms. They then release all the carbohydrate within these organisms' bodies back into CO2 in the process of respiration. So describe how living things are involved in the constant cycling of carbon. I basically laid it out using this number scheme just to make it really straightforward. Green plants photosynthesize, bam, 1. This takes in CO2, so a bit of detail there. Used to make carbohydrates, possibly a harder one. The idea of that glucose is made, that's a carbohydrate. So that would be another way of putting it. Number 2, animals eat or feed on green plants. Okay, that's another mark, nice and easy. Then there's got 3 being the respiration. Animals, plants respire and they release CO2. You can see how you can just get all the 6 marks available wherever it's there. Really easy just to, you can get 6 just from writing all of that. Okay, I hope that so far all of this makes sense. Then you've got that idea of explaining 4 plants and animals die, microorganisms decay, dead organisms, and the microorganisms respire. So look at all those marks available. Now it is a quality of written communication question, and certainly needs to be in that sort of order. You can't start contradicting yourself. That's a way to lose that 6th mark. Okay, so now moving on to a question related to compost heap, which I hope you guys have in your garden or know someone who's got one. Quite tricky. There's a lot of information there. You almost need to translate it a bit like a French or German text. It's just like, okay, what is the first thing? You've got compost, that's basically dead plant matter. So that goes right at the bottom, like producers, always with the food, with pyramids of biomass. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Compost on the bottom, they're talking in there saying that earthworms and slugs eat it, so that's going to go above. Hedgehogs above that. And then finally this idea that the hedgehog is scratching itself because of fleas. So that must be the thing on top. That's the thing that consumes the hedgehogs. Okay, and that's a case of pyramids of biomass, always pyramid shaped. Conditions for decay, written warmth, water or moisture, and oxygen. So absolutely required for them. Okay, got another graph. How cruel. Okay, gardeners often put waste material onto compost heaps. The graph shows how the conditions in a compost heap affect how quickly waste material in the heap decays. So clearly they've basically done 2 compost heaps. They've done one at 25 degrees Celsius and one at 15 degrees Celsius. And they've done a beautiful little experiment comparing them. Hopefully it's a fair test. The only thing that they've changed is the degrees Celsius. So rate of decay, like looking at perhaps the loss of the biomass there. So what they're asking you for, what's the effect of increasing temperature at 20 degrees, 20% oxygen. So I've gone up from 20% oxygen and along to the rate of decay, which is 30, and I went up to the 25 degrees Celsius line and went along to 60. So very simply, rate of decay increases from 30 to 60, those values. And would you agree that would be doubling? Okay, so there's 2 marks available there, so hopefully you know from this you need to quote figures or you need to manipulate them. So doubling, like you're really making quite a savvy little observation there. Okay, now in terms of a compost heap, there you go, you can see sort of a man-made one there. Why they're holes? To allow oxygen in. So what is it? It's dead matter there, and the only way it's going to decay is if you've got microorganisms, moisture and water. So really the holes allow the oxygen in for respiration by microorganisms, and it also allows microorganisms in, because remember they're just in the air everywhere, too small to see, and they're going to get in and that's going to help with the decay. Also this idea that heat, to allow heat out. Now if you fill a compost it'll be steaming because of all the microorganism decay, so having the holes means it won't overheat, and next year you'll learn about why overheating is so bad. Perhaps you even know from being ill that like it's quite dangerous to overheat. You hear about that all the time. So the gardener then had lovely plants growing, and he put the compost. Okay, you might see your parents doing that. He put the compost there, and then he said, "Oh look, it's growing really nicely, nice like flowers and things like that." Question being why? Compost has high mineral ions. Remember that's during the decay that gets released. We looked at that in the first question. Things like magnesium helps make chlorophyll. With chlorophyll it can photosynthesize, and also nitrates for making protein. So putting a bit of detail there for the second mark. So that's quite tricky, but that is something that you'll go over and over again. Those are the 2 mineral ions you need to learn about or memorise and see what they make. Okay, now on to some maths questions. Yeah, pretty horrible actually. Showed the amount of energy, so it could be like the mass represent the energy in kilojoules per metre squared. So they've actually worked out the energy content. You can see 88,000 there, 14,000, 16,000 and 88. That sounds about right, the energy going down. Calculate the percentage of energy in the plants that is passed on to the top carnivore. Now of that 88,000 there, only 88 goes into the top carnivore. So that's that kind of sense of a proportion which you do in maths. So 88 of that 88,000 because they've asked you to do a percentage, you times it by 100, and that ends up being 0.1%. So that's incredibly inefficient, isn't it? All that lovely biomass getting lost as you go along. Okay,